Simple questions for 100 people. Welcome to the experiment. I'm Bill Correll, and this is my investigation. I'm researching to gather data from 100 beautiful human beings for the sole purpose to see what actually happens across the interviews. The questions are fixed, and all the interviews will remain consistent, with the variable being the actual participants themselves and their answers. So it's as if I'm having you, Laura, come sit on my porch to share your thoughts so that I can learn about people. We're looking forward to what we will learn when we're done, but in the meantime, we're really interested in your story and this process. And it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my guests. Well, how about I let you do it for me? What is your full name?
Laura Claire Brown.
Claire
Yes.
with an
Yes.
E?
No, without. And it was one that I actually gave myself because we were not given middle names as children. So,
That's interesting.
mhm.
And some would say not very usual. So, talk to me about the process of not having a middle name. And then when did you decide that you really deserved a middle name and gave yourself Claire?
So my when I got married is when I brought that in. But our none of our family was given middle names. Not quite sure why, the reasoning behind that. But my original name was Laura Bratz. And so when I changed my name to Brown when I got married, Claire was my mother's maiden name. So that's what I went to as my middle name
And that's
for kind of honoring her.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very traditional. And men, a lot of times back in the day, especially the turn of the last century, would be given their mother's maiden name as a middle name.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. And if you think about it, it was kind of a nice way to co-join the names of the people that are getting married, you know? Instead of
Absolutely.
having a hyphenated name like got started and rejuvenated in the 60s and 70s, um, my wife's father's middle name was absolutely his mother's surname. So,
Oh, love. That's
boy,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. All right, exciting. What's your favorite nickname that most people don't know?
So I don't really have a nickname. I my husband every so often calls me Peta and a few friends. So I can be a Peta. But I never really had a nickname. I It's very interesting. I don't know why about that either. So
All right, so I'm going out I'm on a limb here. I think that letter is I, not E, correct? Not to be
yeah,
confused with the organization PETA, PETA.
exactly. Though that could match because of my love for animals. But yeah, PITA is
It's all in the interpretation, right?
exactly.
Excellent. So, no pet names, the mom and dad, brothers, sisters, nothing?
No, my name is spelled differently. So I think because my mom spelled my name differently and I always had to spell my name out to everyone, that probably just is where it's at because that was already complicated.
Yeah, and I had a sister whose name was Laura, Laura,
Mhm.
um, and I appreciate the uniqueness, but also the beauty of the Lora. It's quite nice.
Absolutely. I like it. I do. The uniqueness for years where people said Lori because they all thought I spelled it wrong. And I'm like, no, it really is Laura. And even in the hospital when I was born, they kept bringing my birth certificate back, like you spelled it wrong, and my mom kept saying, "No, I didn't." So it was an interesting thing. So I love the uniqueness of it. I always kind of have. So
Beautiful. So on to question number 3. When did you first notice what color hair you had?
well, I didn't have any hair till I was 3, so probably around 3, and was disturbed that I wasn't a bright redhead because our whole family was redheads and I had dark hair. So but yeah, probably about 3 when I finally got here.
That's interesting. Can you actually remember a specific time?
It was a question when I asked my mom, like, how come all the women in our family have red hair and I'm the one that does not, and how did that happen? So it was just kind of clear right before I was, or right after I was starting school, and kids were like, "Your hair looks different from your family," and I was like, "Oh yeah, it does. Why am I not a redhead?"
Did that start the background conversation of, am I adopted, or was the cable guy, or
Me and my sister always suspected maybe the milkman or something, but
there you go.
yeah.
Amazing. So, red hair, that's
Mhm.
interesting. Were both your parents Jewish?
No, my father was not, as far as we know. He was adopted, so we weren't quite sure. But no, our Jewish side of our family, all the women have red hair, all the men have dark hair. So
I love it.
yeah,
That's very, Scandinavian slash, Irish, or maybe
yeah,
Scottish.
not
There's
quite
some
sure.
Viking blood in there somewhere, I think.
Probably we were. Yeah, that's also a suspect on my dad's side for sure.
Well, that's interesting. We had a couple of folks in our family who had red hair when they were really, really young, and then it turned. But everybody else's hair was either blonde or brunette. But I had five brothers and sisters, and then my mom and dad, but they were both brunettes. Just for your information.
That's wonderful. I
So,
love.
Laura, what's your favorite thing to do to intentionally waste time?
I love to spend time with animals. We tend to have a lot of animals. So if I'm wasting time, I'm usually cuddling with animals, playing, talking, that kind of thing. Um, and then I also like to just be outside. So I'll go outside and stare at the stars or stare at the clouds and just be in that moment. That's my time waste.
Excellent. What kind of animals do you have?
Right now, we don't have any, which is the first time in 50 years. But we've always had dogs and the big dogs, not little ones, always the big scary ones, pit bulls and Rottweilers, German Shepherds, things like that. So,
The sneaky part of that is you and I both know they are very docile breeds naturally. They need
absolutely.
to be hooked up with a really bad human being to get bad habits, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. I was in Colorado when they did the pit bull ban, which was very devastating. Because I'm used to them being gentle creatures, and that's what I knew. And so it was just one of those, what happened? How did this even come about? So I was still young and unclear. I'm now very well aware. I'm always have been a big advocate for all the big dogs in general. But
Yes.
yeah, pit bulls hold a very special place in my heart. So
Yeah. And how many pit bulls do you think you've had?
come through my door probably 30, 40, maybe 50.
All right. So now we've hit an interesting topic. Not that the others weren't, but this is very interesting. Are were you doing a shelter, or like some kind of a foster program for animals? What was that all about?
Yeah, we have done fostering. We work with animal rescues. I go in and help in the rescues with rehab and things like that, as well as um, my mom was a bus driver in Colorado for RTD, and she used to bring strays on the bus all the time and bring them home. So it was just, and with her, that was a wide variety of dogs. So we've had, kind of, I think we've had every breed of the medium to large size dog at some point
Yeah.
cross our path.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
where in Colorado were you?
I grew up in Denver, on the east side of Denver, and Five Points area. Went to Manual High School.
Yeah. So when you think of Denver, I was born there. I went to the University of Colorado. Um, I have a lot of family in Denver. And so the names of communities that are so-called Denver, like Arvada and Westminster and Thornton and North Glen, you know, uh, all of those, Aurora. I was born in Aurora. Yeah, My dad was in the service, Fitzsimmons Army Hospital. So
Oh, wow.
that's kind of neat. And how long ago did you leave Denver?
Well, we were in Aurora before we left, and we moved to Oklahoma a little over 6 years ago.
So it's been recent. Yeah. How about
Yes.
that?
Yeah,
And you're finding things quite different in Oklahoma from Denver, Colorado?
very much so. It was a big adjustment, I will say that. We love it here. It's a different pace of life than what
Yeah.
Colorado had kind of become. And I do love that. I'm getting older. I like that quieter, more country living life. But yeah, it was a huge adjustment for us and our family because all of us kind of came from a city living kind of atmosphere. So,
Are you more rural and in the country at this point, or just a different kind of neighborhood?
yes, we are country. We're in a neighborhood, but all the other corners around us are all farms. So,
That's
cattle, horses, lots of little mini ranches everywhere.
so you can go out and get your mammal fix anytime you want to, huh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love it.
And you didn't give anything up with regard to the sky. They're both big sky, big, beautiful, starry. Yeah, maybe it's easier to see the stars now than it was in Denver because the ambient light from the city sometimes makes that a little bit more obscure, especially pollution and what have you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Much clearer. And it was part of my requirements when we moved here was I want to be somewhere where there's no city lights so I can see true stars instead of city stars.
Exactly. I mean, it's almost like cleaning your windshield on your car, after driving it through a summer worth of dust storms and all that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely. I love that analogy because that's perfect. It is exactly what it is. It was so clear now. Like, wow.
Or before you might see a few hundred stars, now you see a few 100,000. They're just,
Yeah,
wow, is that what that looks like? Yeah.
exactly.
So good for you. And we got there by asking what you do to waste time. Isn't that lovely?
I love it. Conversations just flow.
Yeah. So, Laura, what's your favorite movie to watch alone?
I am a rom-com person alone. I don't have a very rom-com husband. So I and my one of my favorites is 50 First Dates. Because it is the one probably that my husband will watch with me the most.
Yeah. What do
Yeah.
you like about it?
Um well, I like the pretense of it. I like the idea of, kind of growing through that. But if a lot of it comes from my husband feels that same way about me. So I have ADHD and I tend to forget things. And after 16 years of marriage, there's times where I'm like, we did that. He's like, a few times. I'm like, oh, okay. So I think he kind of feels like he's living in that world a little bit, and me too at times. So.
You've got a live-in historian that can actually explain to you what you did before and that you don't have any recollection of at all.
Exactly.
That can be a good thing, but it sounds like it could also be a little annoying every once in a while. Sounds to me like he does it with love.
Absolutely. He does it with love. But I'm sure it's very annoying at times when he's like, you don't remember? I'm like, oh, no, sorry.
Good. I'm at the point right now where I'm trying to, I think, is Julia Roberts in that?
Drew Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore. Oh, yes. Okay. I'm starting to get into the right church now. I will have to watch that again because I like Drew. I especially like her movies. Absolutely. And you just awakened that in me again. So thank you.
Good, good.
So that's a great movie to watch alone and with somebody, especially with your husband.
Mhm.
But here's the one I'm looking forward to asking you.
Okay.
If you were to have an action figure made of you, what superpowers would it have and what colors would its uniform be?
Hmm. Well, my favorite colors are blue, green, and purple. So it would probably be that.
Nice.
Um, and probably super animal lover. I'm not quite sure exactly what the name would be, but it would have to do with animals.
It's super animal lover.
Yeah.
Girl. Yeah, I
I'm the
like it.
animal defender is what I am.
I like it. I really do.
Thank you.
Let's talk some more about that. What would you actually do with your superpower? You super animal lover, you.
It's always been a dream of mine to open a rescue, to have a real facility where lots of different things can happen and support in the community. I think that how we treat animals is a direct correlation of how we treat people. And working with teenagers for so many years in my first career, I have learned that there is a direct correlation with some of the behavioral stuff, usually starts with animals. So um, people all kind of have their little thing that they love, where you can love the world, but they have their one specific thing they really truly hone in on. And for
Yes.
me, that was animals. I'm a huge advocate for, animal rights and how we treat them and why it needs to be different and stuff like that. So,
So I appreciate and I love, that you've got kinda like 2 groups there. They're both groups that I love as well. Not that that matters to you, but it matters to me that that's where you operate in the world. Can you tell us a little bit about, what you did with teenagers?
I worked with behavioral, I guess in quotes, behavioral teenagers in residential facilities and in juvenile court. So they were having problems and needed to be put into facilities. We didn't always want jail for them, so they would come into the residential facilities for programs. Um, and then I also was a case manager with Denver Juvenile Court, working with kids who were on pretrial.
Yeah.
So they were arrested for something, they were going through the trial process, but again, we didn't want to leave them in jail for that whole period. So we would monitor them in public, at home, and at school and stuff like that. So
So did you have a set of criteria that or some kind of a judgment that they would have to do in order to be set free at some point in the future? Or was it all just a matter of just discussing the cases as they went along and then more or less deciding which ones were appropriate for this environment and which ones probably needed to do something else?
yeah, as the case manager, we had a lot of say of programs available. When I was in the residential facilities, they were already sentenced to those facilities
Okay.
that we were working in. So then it was just more working through programs about, I did, part of mine was teaching life skills, accountability, just looking at the world a different way. Um, and then the other programs were more working on their behavior and how they approach things and stuff like that. We usually did in groups. So there was a lot of accountability factors among the group. Going through their program, they had to kind of learn how to be in society in a way that was more civil, I guess. I don't, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But
But it's always, behavior based it's kind of a heartbreak to me to see the number of kids even today, probably worse than when you were doing it,
Mhm.
in terms of gross numbers and everything, but they're just messing with, chemistry, to a far greater degree than when I was that age, you know?
Mhm.
But at the same time, everybody deserves a chance to get back on the straight and narrow, and when we're talking about behaviors, I mean, you can't legislate behaviors. All you can do is try to recondition, retrain, and
Mhm.
give them a reason in their own mind, to be here and make a difference with their own behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
Society has a
how many
standard, I think so.
it has a what?
I said society seems to have a standard that they think is proper, and that doesn't always work across the board for everybody. So it's more finding, not trying to fix them, but just trying to get an understanding of taking accountability for the actions that you've done, and those life skills of caring for others in a way where you don't want to harm other people, or you don't want to maybe say the things that you say that create a then chaos moment or, a fight or whatever else. So it was more teaching that of sometimes it's okay to hold your tongue. Or other times it is truly necessary for you to speak up and speak your truth, and knowing when those times kind of come
Yeah,
about.
and giving them different words to say, that are more powerful than just acting out and not being understood.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I appreciate that you did that, and I thank you for that, and I really understand better, your affinity for dogs at this point. Because in many ways, we're talking about the exact same sort of, we've got this is acceptable, but they behave like this. And this
Mhm.
stuff over here and this stuff over here. We'll keep this stuff because it's great, but this stuff on this side, we got to do a little well, let's see if we can generate some interest on their part to behave differently.
Yeah, a little fine tuning.
So that's a great superpower. And thank you for really kind of, distinguishing it for me.
Thank you.
So, what did you want to grow up to be when you were 5 years old?
I absolutely wanted to be a veterinarian. I knew it from jump.
Yeah.
And yeah, that didn't happen. Several
And
factors, but
and is that because you were around diverse animals from an early age because your mom kept bringing strays home, or was it something else?
I probably that had a lot to do with it, but I really was just on that path. I was really in that world and learning so much. And then created an allergy to animals. And so we didn't stop bringing animals in, but there were rules in the house about they couldn't be in my room anymore. And I couldn't be all in my face loving on them. So it hindered my ability to be able to go into that field. I've now since overcome the allergies, so I kind of wish maybe I'd kept on that path, but it definitely sent me in a different path. And I did remain in rescue, but the veterinarian side of it kind of came out of the picture. So
Nice. So your reaction to the allergy, what were the symptoms?
I broke out in hives. I couldn't breathe. It was like a full anaphylactic shock kind of thing that happened. It still happens from time to time, especially if I pet an animal and rub my eyes or something and forget. And it'll immediately start, everything starts to close up. My eyes get ready, and I'm like, oh, great. Let me go wash my hands real fast and wash my face before this becomes a problem.
That's yeah, now you know what to do and how to deal with it. That's pretty awesome. And so how did you beat the allergy to where you could actually be around them, but just not, like you said, rub them all over your face and body, right?
Exactly. I really don't know. It just through time, I think I finally just built that immunity up.
Yep.
Um, I think if you're unwilling to give something up, then your body will eventually go, okay, we're just gonna go ahead and then let you have this, maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it
Well,
just I never stopped. So
there's an awful lot to, people putting their mind to something and actually correcting it, at that level. I think that's pretty cool too. But, you know, you of all people should not have something that terrible happens to you just because you're loving on animals.
yes, I agree. I have to
But you didn't have that reaction with teenagers, did you?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely learned to hate him.
Ah, there you go. A different kind of allergy.
Exactly. And I knew I was gonna have mine one day, so I had to get to a certain point where I no longer hated them. Part of why I stopped working with them was the idea that I couldn't be effective if I had become so burned out by what happened. So, and things that were going on and stuff. So in that world, you're not only fighting the kids and all the stuff in the programs that you don't always necessarily agree with,
Right.
but you're fighting all of the judicial side of everything as well. So it can be very tiresome to those in that field for long periods of time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So did you have to accompany your kids into juvenile court and when they were being, uh, interviewed either by a prosecutor or the judge, and when they were deciding what kind of a sentence they were going to be given, and what their story was, and what their most recent transgressions were, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, as a case manager in juvenile court, that's what we had to do. And it was fun, and judges are, if you don't have your ducks in a row and you're in front of a judge, they let you know. They're not so nice. So again, it was kind of those parts of things, and but our opinions mattered. We did get to say, we're working with them now and this is what we see. So we were part of the overall factor into what their sentences would be, and guilty, not guilty, all the other things. So there were several reports, several meetings, and being in front of the courts and stuff. So
Did the judges tend to ask you what your opinion was about the right course of treatment for the person you were with, and actually listen to you, or was it less personal than that?
no, they actually got personal with us. It did matter, especially if the social worker and the lawyers, and if there was just no cohesiveness among them,
Yeah.
then they would really turn to us and be like, "Look, you spent this time with them, you know them, you meet them every week, you're in their home. Give us a reality check of what's happening." And so, yeah, then we would definitely speak up and say, these are the things we see, these are red flags, these are not red flags, and that kind of stuff. So,
Well, that's an extraordinary level of commitment, and also probably energy drain.
oh,
I can imagine there were times that you were in a juvenile court going, "I should not be the one here doing this right now. It should be anyone but me." And then other times you probably were saying, "I am so glad I'm here. This might
yeah.
have gone badly if I hadn't been here." So
I
that's
had a unique perspective because I grew up where I grew up and how I grew up. I was involved in gangs. I was involved in, I guess, what people risky behavior of my own. I was not the easiest child in the world for my mother, as a single parent for sure. So I had a different perspective a lot of times on where behaviors may have come from, instead of, just they're just bad kids, So
yeah,
that's kind of where my fight back always came into, was I grew up like these kids. I lived like these kids, and I wasn't that far removed from them. When I started working with them, I was 19. So I was just coming out of that world myself. And I did that by moving to Oakland for 2 years, and then coming and working there with their teenagers, and then coming back to Colorado to kind of separate myself from the community aspects. Like, I loved our community, but there were aspects of it that were very influential. So during that time frame, so I wasn't that far from removed from their age group either already. So I had a different perspective, and we grew up very non-judgmental. So I think I was more, people would say I was more on the side of the kids, and I'm just like, I'm more on the side of not having that judgment, and let's figure out what the deeper core problems are. So
yeah, good for you. Because if there's ever a way to get a kid back on the straight and narrow, it's the way to go. Putting them, incarcerating them and just giving them a timeout for years at a time, it produces no good result ever, and they usually end up coming out worse than they went in, so in my experience, and good. So this is interesting, and we got there from your desire to be a veterinarian when you were 5. What would you say your greatest accomplishment is?
I have raised an amazing son. I love being a wife. I am people oriented and being with the animals. So I think for me, it's the ability to just not be non-judge, or to be non-judgmental, and live in this world in a way that's just very accepting of who everybody is and allowing them to be. So I think
Yeah.
for me, it's more my mindset is the accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you mentioned that you had, um, experience in Denver, and this is
Mm.
a a lot of kids go through this where their neighborhood has gangs, they're members of gangs. They're doing that more than because to not be a member of a gang is dangerous, you know?
Mhm.
My dad grew up in Detroit where
Oh,
uh, they were lower middle class. My grandfather, worked, for Chrysler Corporation, but my dad managed to never be a member of a gang, and then he got out of Detroit. And I'm just wondering what your story, because what you just talked about is that you are describing yourself as kind of like Oklahoma American Gothic now. That family and husband and children, that wasn't necessarily an aspiration of a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old that was running with the wrong people, you know?
no.
Now,
Well,
were you involved in it in particular yourself, or did you, just watch people around you kind of doing weird things?
I was involved myself and around. So in our community, the it wasn't just that we were like, we're going to join a gang. It was, we were living in our community as friends, we're hanging out, we know each other.
Right.
And LA did this terrible thing where instead of dealing with their own gang problems, they banned all of them. And they
Well,
all
that's
came
that's
running
gonna
to a
work,
whole bunch
right?
of States, right? So you take a community of people that, get along, that are friendly, that enjoy each other, and you then add in that aspect of, well, I can make you money, I can have this going on. So then things start to, I money and drugs come into it, and lines start to get drawn and people start to lean a certain way, and it became glorified in a way that was not our experience. Every little neighborhood has their people, like this little group or clique of kids and this clique of kids, and we were our peoples, right?
Yes.
So that's really what we were. So I was on the east side, and I was with the Crips on the east side. I went to a school. I went to George Washington for 2 years, and
Yep.
that was considered an all blood area school. So I was definitely crossing lines, but I knew these kids. Like, we were all friends, and it made zero difference about those lines drawn. But for protection and for or ideas of protection, you kind of pick where you are. And, I still always cross lines. I tend to be a lot safer than other people felt. But we lost so many people. We lost hundreds within my high school years. And the
Back in the
idea that we
90s?
well, yeah, I was in high school with 87 to or 88 to 93.
Yep.
So, yeah. But it definitely, the height of it started in around 87 when I was in junior high, for us. And that was it just happened. Like, there was no plan. And it just kind of, everybody started feeling that push from the ones coming in and getting in our ears and saying, well, we can do this and we can do this. And Colorado was fresh meat, I guess, for lack of a better word again, but we were a fresh canvas, from what LA was. And that definitely made it difficult. So,
Well, I'll tell you what, again, I had some experience in the middle of the 1990s trying to mitigate all of that in communities around us. But there was a period of time where the Crips and the Bloods were actively recruiting in every single community in the United States and Canada.
yeah.
And their goal was to syndicate and to be able to had some smart people that were involved with it and said, "Hey, look, they can't get all of us. And how
Yeah.
do we raise the most money that we're going to need if somebody has a big court case or something of that nature? We can't do that as a clique here in Watts or here in Aurora, or like that." So that
Yeah.
when you start becoming some part of something that's bigger than you, especially like that,
Mhm.
and those two gangs from the outside, they were portrayed as evil.
Yes.
Nobody ever took the time to figure out why they doing this. For the most part, in a lot of cases, they didn't have a home life, you know?
Right.
Their friends became their family, and what their family did became the tie, and they shared blood with each other, and before you know it, they would do anything that somebody needed them to do just because we're friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
It's
perfectly natural human reactions for things.
yeah. Well,
But who
and the
takes
story behind the Crips and Bloods, even in LA, doesn't come to light. So again, like you say, they're portrayed as evil. It did not start off that way.
right,
I happen to, I'm highly involved in Denver at that time, the Five Points and East Side area was a very dominant Black neighborhood.
right,
And I grew up that way. So my mother had us very culturally ingrained with lots of different cultures. We were living in the community. Um, we were also part of the LGBTQ community because that's where it was then. And so there was a lot of different cultures and a lot of different beliefs that were all kind of being intermixed for us as a family. Um, and I started seeing things that I didn't appreciate that wasn't, it was a protection necessity that kind of came in from those that, I don't want to be too political, but there was a fear that came into the community when outsiders were coming in and trying to control and things were happening. So there's a lot of racial then tension, and there was a lot of, gender tensions between those communities, and different things started happening. So I think left to their own, and the way that it started, the idea of what it was and why it was necessary, even in California, the way it started, became politicized into that negative, ugly feeling. And then it became glorified into that violence and that drug world and this way of being and stuff. And it didn't need to be that way, but there are so many factors, and I definitely have my opinions on those things. But I am a avid supporter still of the Black community, of the LGBTQIA plus now. There's a few
oh,
added.
USC, yes,
There was
right.
just Q up to Q when I was young. So
Yeah, yeah, I know.
and I have, my mother and my sister are both lesbians, and so I definitely grew up with all women, all lesbians primarily, and primarily all Black women. So me being in that community and being an advocate in those ways, in those areas, was just, it was huge for me. Those were the things that mattered. So, and how I saw it. We were not violent people. I'm not inherently a violent person, but I had a violent upbringing, because we were protecting ourselves in a lot of ways. And I was a Jew. When people found that out, that was a whole nother set of anti-Semitism and things like that. So it was just a lot of different things. But inherently, I don't think anybody just starts off like, I just am going to be a violent person and terrorize and kill and, force drugs and this other stuff. I think it just morphs into that when stories are portrayed in a certain ways. So I
Completely
did.
understand, and you know what? A lot of times, a very small thing gets blown out of proportion. It gets generalized to a whole population, and now instead of talking about 2 or 300 people on the east side of Denver, you're now talking about 2 or 3 million all over the continental US.
Yeah.
And paint with a broad brush and like they're all the same, and they're just not. You're a really great example of that, and I mean, hats off to you. I wanna say I now understand your greatest accomplishment, with a deeper understanding for sure.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you. I
and
appreciate
congratulations on that. And I know it's a work in progress for you, that this is something that, your family, and your commitment to all the people around you, all the folks that you just described, it's a big commitment, and you don't know all those people, but you're always going to have a light on for them?
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. So This is really cool. I mean, we're getting into an area here. Offline, there's more for us to talk about. But Laura,
Okay.
who's your favorite person to listen to?
Well, music wise, I'm a big music baby and I love music. And my favorite is Alicia Keys. I
Okay.
just love it. I'm a fangirl. I'm not a normal fangirl, but I am a fangirl of Alicia Keys. So
Yeah.
I just
Is
love.
there are there any speakers or what you would consider thought leaders or something of that nature that you like to listen to as well, or are you more or less um, at a different kind of a place in your life where what other people are having to say is maybe a little bit less important to you?
Yes and no. I am a fan of Brene Brown and a few of the other spiritual leaders. I am more, and I watch a lot and study a lot of the channelers, Bashar and things like that. So on that spiritual world. So I do a lot more of that, the spiritual, being within the spiritual world. And there's just a lot of them that we actually listen to. So, but probably the typical ones that most people listen to within the spiritual world. But yeah, I am a huge fan of Bashar, who's a channeler, and then I like the mindset of women. So I don't have a favorite. But I love the women that are bringing the empowerment and the women to the forefront that are, really in that movement of, equality and our rights not being taken away and, just really giving those platforms and that true fighting spirit maybe for women that are really bringing that out. And that's again how I was raised with the women. It was women are empowered, stand in your place, do not bend. You are, you have all the rights, you have everything. And I was just coming into a world when rights were just barely being given, with a single mother, so
Yeah.
it was, that kind of stuff. So I'm really just more in that world when it comes to women empowerment and in that spiritual journey and growth. So I don't truly have a favorite. It's more the movement, I think, for me.
Very clear. And quite frankly, it's something you live and not something you say, from my experience with you. Just in a couple of having an opportunity to chat with you a little bit the other day.
Yeah.
So now we'll come to the present. Please complete this sentence, if you will. When I grow up, I'd like to.
I don't want to grow up. I'd like to remain a child. So when I grow up, I want to go back to childhood. Maybe I should say that.
Or recommit for another 10 years?
Yeah.
Re-up for another 10 years. I like
Yeah.
that.
I'd like to be a childlike spirit.
Yeah.
Um, but when I grow up, I want to just continue on that path of the movement of what I feel and just loving on people, being able to give back to the community and do all of the things that make community an amazing place to be. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, what's your definition of being childlike? What kind of thoughts do you have? What's the characteristic of children that you think is so worth preserving in your own life? And how would you say that you are childlike in your thoughts and behavior?
I think with children, with their lack of censor, I absolutely adore it. As we get older, we're told how to behave and how to act. And as an ADHD person, I tend to mimic people around me. I heard people all my life like, "Oh my God, your mother would be so ashamed," and I'd go, "Oh, I probably shouldn't do that then," and I'd fix that, right? Um, I love the idea of, though I was a difficult child, I was very honest. I was very upfront. Nobody questioned anything about how I felt or, what I thought. And I love that. I love the idea that children are just free to feel, to think, to do, to be who they are, and to not lose that. And that's what I would love to go back to, is that authentic, this is who I am, love me or hate me, enjoy. Like, I'm not going to be worried about what I say or what I do or who I offend. If I offend you, you're not for me. We can part and be loving. I offend lovingly. But it's those things where if we don't see eye to eye and we can't have a a conversation that doesn't include a battle of some kind, then I don't want to engage. I just want to, this is how I feel. That's how you feel. Yay, let's move forward, and kind of get past all of that. So that's how I see kids. I see kids with that just genuine honesty and ability to say what's on their mind, what they think, without all of the censors that happen as we get older.
Excellent.
Mhm.
I appreciate your being a child, and I support it, and I invite you to continue doing that for the rest of your life,
No, thank you.
for what it's worth. Uh, so what's the most important thing in life to you right now?
Um, well, I'm working through this business because I have goals, and also really supporting my son in trying to figure out where he's going with his life, though he doesn't have to know that at 20. But I think really just leaning in more to all the things that I have supported through my life, to really lean into that more, use my voice and use my presence. More in all of the things that really are truly dear to me and dear to my heart. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
good stuff. Uh, and so later, what would you like to leave in the world after your life is done? Long time from now.
The idea that you have permission to be who you are. Just, I would love to leave that legacy of there is no need to change. There is no need for you to be inauthentic, that your life can be what it is. You're not here to be suitable for everybody in the world. So be suitable for those that love you and that you love, and where your tribe is, where your people are, and don't worry about the rest.
That's a pretty great legacy, The skin you're in, love it.
Hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. So I have a baker, um, and she's this beautiful Italian woman. And every time I go in, and I don't do it as much as I used to before COVID, but if I go in and get a dozen donuts or a dozen cupcakes or a dozen cookies or anything, always get a 13th one. And so we've had 12 questions, and you get a free 13th question. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it.
The baker's question is, what's the thing that most people misunderstand about you, Laura?
Hmm. I think people feel that I'm always in debate, or that I'm always enjoying conflict, or I'm stirring things up. Um, and I'm not. But I think that's the big thing, is that I do human design. So for those that understand it or have heard about human design, it literally, I am a catalyst in my human design. Um, and so I embrace that. I am not purposely ever trying to start conflict or disruption or anything else, but in some ways I am. I think we grew up so open, and our mom allowed us to be who we were, no matter what, with no judgment, no care about what would happen, because she knew we would be, in our eyes, good people, or in her eyes, like, I think she always knew we had a heart for people and things, or animals and things. So I think that's really what it is. It's just that I am a catalyst. I am here for change. I want change. I absolutely do. So if that does mean I come across as a bit combative or confrontational, then so be it. But I truly am not. I just really, I have a passion that is It's been in me since I was little. I've just kind of always known I was pushed towards that. And those passions will come out how they're supposed to, and that I unapologetically, I will be who I am unapologetically. So,
I yeah, I kinda get that you would be how unapologetically. However, I you also strike me as the kind of person that doesn't intentionally leave messes around. If there's an opportunity to clean it up and move on, you'll do that. However, if you put your effort in and it's still not cleaned up and people have maintained an attitude about what you said or what you did, then you're perfectly satisfied with them to stay with that, having given it your best shot.
yeah,
That's what I
absolutely.
see
We
in you.
get all the time that I'm the rip the band-aid off or face the mirror, and
Yeah,
then I'll hold your hand through it. But I am that one that rips the band-aid off. I just say it no matter how harsh it feels,
yeah,
and then or do it, and then yeah, and then but I'm there. I don't just do that and run away for everything to explode. I stand in it with you and deal through the whole thing. So
yeah. I love it, and, I've kinda learned and then forgotten that I knew this. Sometimes it's good to say, "I'm not sure how this is gonna come out, but this is the words I've got available to me right now," you know? "Don't take it personally because this is my reflection that I'm seeing back to me, and I'm gonna give it to you that way, and then you let me know what you got," that sort of thing.
yeah.
Because I don't think you're in the business of killing relationships. I see you as having had some friends that they've hung out with you through thick and thin a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot from my friends because they get it too, probably more than anything. My poor husband, but and my son. But you get used to that. You understand it comes from love. It's never come from anything but light and love, and just a really good place in my heart. So
Boy, wouldn't it be great if we could, like, give everybody access to that, where they could be able to, like the training for the kids, not have the appropriate words, but take a moment or 2 and figure out what they're going to do, if anything, before having a reactive scenario.
right. And then accepting if they don't. Sometimes the process is longer. So you can do that, rip off the band-aid, and then they've got a process to kind of deal with. And I have been the villain in many stories, and I'm okay with that. I do not mind being the villain in a story as long as you use it for good. You understand that I won't remain the villain. Like you've got to
Yes.
figure out how to get past that.
You know, the savior often looks like the villain at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any questions of me?
I just really love what you're doing. And I wanted to say that the ability to come in and ask those questions and bring out conversations that most people wouldn't hear or know. I just truly find that remarkable because it does take a big heart and a person with dedication to truly do something like that. So,
Thank you. I will take that acknowledgement. I'm
absolutely.
getting so much out of it too. I mean, it's a labor of love. I've always loved people because, like yourself, my friends and my family and my community, it changed a lot while I was growing up. We were nomads across the country, but at the same time, Um, I've always been interested in people. I've got better questions now than I used to.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
since you grew up more of a nomad, have you ever done the nomad lifestyle, the traveling across the US and just outside of from your childhood? Have you continued to do that in any way?
I really haven't, other than to go on vacations or to find, if I'm 20 years ago, actually back in the 1990s, I spent a lot of time traveling all over the place to get different types of education. Um, but it's something I could see myself doing. And I'll tell you what, in that vein, what I do, because my wife works diligently as a rural postal carrier, and she every once in a while is working 6 or 7 days a week. I'll just, 2 months ago, I hopped in my car, um, my new convertible that I bought, new to me, not new at all, 2005, and I just drove and contacted people up and down the East Coast and went spend a day or two with them, or maybe out to dinner, or maybe 2 or 3 days, But I got in contact with probably 13 or 14 people, many of whom I'd never met before, but have been Facebook friends for 15 or 20 years. uh, Old friends that I've had for a very long time, a couple of which are struggling, with different forms of cancer, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever see them again, and they were wonderful times with them. So
Mhm.
that nomad thing, I put 3,500 miles on my car in 2 weeks.
Oh, love. Well, congratulations.
Although that's not an extended nomad, I'd say it was probably the way I do things. It was probably, hyperspace nomad quickly.
Absolutely. I'm loving the new digital nomad center world. I even have clients with that they're traveling. They have these amazing RVs and they're going on these trips, and I'm so jealous. So they tell me their stories, and I'm like, oh, I wish I was there. But I love it. I'm not a big traveler. I love being home. But we've traveled a lot. I just have a real big security about being home. But I love the fact that they can do that. They can get out there and just travel and be a part of it. And I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are going to do it again for 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of November. My lovely wife and I are going to hop in the car, and pretty much do the same thing and go see some of our common friends that we haven't seen in Florida for a few years. But
Oh, beautiful.
so, any other thoughts that you want to share in terms of all of the? You've been so generous and so open about pretty much everything I've asked you, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's great.
I enjoy the conversation. I'm interested because I didn't realize that you were from Colorado. Did you stay there long? What high school did you go to?
Well,
Maybe.
I'll tell you what, you've got questions, I've got answers, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up here, and we're holding our listener. Some of you guys are interested in this. I know you are, but maybe you and I can do another, just the two of us talking about our shared experiences and family stuff that happened in Denver, and some of the things that we're not maybe so proud of, and other things that, man, they made us who we are, and we're so glad that happened. It's like the human being side of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I think from my perspective, this is one of all I can say is that everybody's great, in these interviews, which are
Mhm.
basically just conversations with Bill. So thanks for coming and hanging out on my porch for a little while, Laura.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And you folks at home, thanks for once again listening to us have this totally spontaneous exchange of ideas and thoughts, all based around some pretty standard questions. And would you do me a favor while I'm thinking of it? I would like for you to accept a little chore that I've got for you. Will you reach out to someone that you know, like, and trust, and maybe even love, and let them know that they matter to you, that your world is better because you know they're here. And if they ever need you, no matter what it is, 24/7, they can call you, and you will help them with whatever terrors they're going through at the moment, and get them through at least to the other side. They've got to know that they've always got to phone a friend and a safety line. So, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is Simple Questions for 100 People. And I'm Bill Correll, and I have absolutely loved my time with you today, my dear guest, Laura Brown.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too.
All right. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Simple Questions for 100 People, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.